And I'm live according to YouTube. Hello, everyone. Hello, Danielle. Hello, Danny, who are both early arrivals for the live stream tonight. It's 10:16, so I'm a minute late from the time I scheduled this for. Let me get things set up nicely, or as nicely as I can. Candy, of course, always going crazy, wants her treat. So we'll take care of her. Otherwise, I don't get any peace. Let me find the treat. Where did I put it? Thought it was in my pocket. Great. Do I have to get up and go get it for? Oh, here in this other pocket. Shake, lay down, speak. Come and get it. There you go. She's an amazing dog. So full of energy, border collies. Lisa's life is here. Danielle is here. Danny is here. Great to have you chiming in on the live chat. Let me make sure. Gotta remember to switch from top to live chat. YouTube likes to, they decide what are the top messages. Darnielle Pistachio, Danny, and Lisa's life. Great to have you all here. Oh, Good Friday. Good Friday. This is the day when our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, went to the cross. Went to what I believe is referred to as an ecumenical service, multi-denominational. My little town, Brighton, Ontario, 14,000 maybe, 13, 14,000 people. And there must have been 300 people in attendance. The church was full. Um, and what happened was the Reformed Church, of which I'm a member, I think I still qualify as a member of that church, even though I have been attending a Pentecostal church in town. And I love both congregations. I love both churches. I love both pastors. And anyway, they combined the two, the Pentecostal and the Reformed Church combined, and I love that. I've spoken often of the fact that there's a chapter of the book of John, the Gospel according to John, chapter 17, which I call a unity prayer. It's before Jesus goes to the cross, and it's a prayer, an exhortation, wanting his followers to be united. And sadly, in this world, we see so much division in this world. And at any rate, the big topic that is sucking all the oxygen out of the room and will be for the next 11 days. What are we? We're the 18th, 10 days, 10 days until the final voting day. We've now entered into the advance polls are now open. I've got Danny saying that he's already voted. I think a lot of people are already voting. I was planning to vote today, but I've decided to hold off until tomorrow. Uh, I didn't want to stop at the community center and then go to church, or go to church and then go to the community center. So I will be voting tomorrow. And there's a few issues I wanted to bring up for discussion tonight, and I invite you to fill up the live chat with your thoughts. I notice there's some discussion going on already with respect to the PPC. That's Maxime Bernier's party. Anyone who's been on my channel for a while knows that in the 2021 and the 2019 election, I actually voted for the PPC. In the last election, I got somewhat involved. I helped organize a meet and greet event. And you have to remember, it was September of 2021 that election took place. We were still in the COVID era. The Freedom Convoy had not yet even taken place. And a lot of people were scared to leave their house. And so we organized, me and some members of the local PPC in my town, in this riding, back then it was called Northumberland, Peterborough South, organized a little meet and greet in the local municipal park in downtown Brighton. Had a guy playing the guitar, playing, easy listening type music, CCR, Simon Garfunkel, guitar music, old guitar music, kind I like. And then We were there with our PPC signs, and Nathan Lang, the candidate, was there shaking hands, engaging with anyone who came along. And probably about 50, 60 people came through the downtown at that point, some intentionally because I had promoted the event on Facebook and through social media. Some, though, were just happening by and decided to check it out. And I even gave a little introductory speech and to invite Nathan Lang to come up and talk and address. And they're there at the time that he made his little speech. There were probably 30-ish people listening. So went reasonably well. And then in this current election, prior to the writ being dropped, I was approached by the president or the president's wife, the two key members of the local electoral district association or riding association for the PPC. And they were asking if I wanted to, put my name up to be the candidate. And I declined. Um, mm, just too much going on in my life to go. And the chances of winning are they're zero. The PPC will not elect a single candidate in this election like they didn't elect anyone in 2021 or 2019. And and I have gone all in with Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party. Having ultimately, Pierre Poilievre has to deliver. One, he has to get elected, and then assuming he does get elected, and I'm praying he does, I think we have a very good chance, especially after that debate performance. I think there's a very good chance he's going to get elected, at least to a minority. Then he has to deliver on his campaign promises. A majority situation would be the best, obviously, because then there's no impediment to putting forth his agenda, fulfilling the promises of his platform. If it's a minority situation, any legislation then requires the support from the opposition benches, from the Liberals, from the NDP, from the Bloc Québécois. It depends how the numbers break down. But the PPC as a party does not even have a party constitution. It is more or less a cult of personality, and that personality is Maxime Bernier. And the PPC has offices in Gatineau, Ottawa. He earns a salary as leader of this political entity that has never elected a member, but there are individuals who will donate hundreds, even a couple $1,000s a year to the PPC party. And if you can get 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 Canadians all kicking in money on a weekly, monthly, basis, and people do this, then there are people who are passionate about their politics and they're passionate about Maxime Bernier and the PPC. And so they will support them financially. They have the means. However, at the end of the day, the PPC is never going to elect a candidate, sadly. So the political landscape in Canada is status quo. I'm going to read what's being written. So that's covering off my thoughts on the PPC in general. Lisa is saying that she would rather vote for Bernier, but she's voting for PP, Pierre Poilievre. Most people don't want to spell Poilievre because it's problematic. It's not the easiest name to spell, so shorten it to just the initials PP. I prefer not to. I prefer to say Poilievre. And if you have trouble with the name, it's perfectly acceptable to pronounce it Poilievre. Very simple. Poly, like polygraph, poly this, poly that, politics, Poilievre, like ever. Poilievre. The French, Poilievre, but you don't have to pronounce it that way. He himself has said he's perfectly fine with people saying Poilievre, and he recognizes that people have trouble when they look at his name written down. You see American commentators, you see Dave Rubin or the Young Turks or any of these other American-based podcasts, and they have difficulty with the name Poilievre. and gives them trouble. Oh, Jay Malik is back. We haven't seen you for a while. Live stream I did earlier today. Someone was saying, "Boy, it'd be nice to have Koj Malik back." Or I miss Koj Malik, and here you are. Wonderful to have you here. Koj Malik, of course, is in the great state of Florida, and Brett Skinner has shown up from the great state of Wyoming. Get a few Americans on here, which is wonderful because I love my American friends. I love the time that I spent growing up in the United States, in New York, New Jersey, and Canada. A Canadian citizen, but a Canadian who spent some time, almost 10 years, living in the aforementioned New York first, then New Jersey, and then 1 year all the way out in Portland, Oregon. You want to talk about beautiful. The Pacific Northwest is gorgeous. And Portland is a beautiful city with Mount Hood on the skyline, one of the Cascade Mountains. I love it. Danny is writing, I have a problem with Easter math. If Jesus was crucified, buried, and rose 3 days later, well, Friday plus 3 days, then and I have the same issue. The interesting thing is that the Passover is, and I'm trying to remember, it's either I think it's the 14th day of the Jewish month of Nisan. It's the 14th or 15th day of the Jewish month of Nisan, and it's a week long observance. And the first day of Passover is a Sabbath day to the Lord. So you have Sabbath, the weekly Sabbath, which starts every Friday night at sundown. That's the beginning of the Sabbath day. However, at sundown on the 14th of Nisan also starts a Sabbath day. So, what day was, because Jesus, when he had the Last Supper, you read in Matthew, I forget what chapter and verse, but he tells his disciples to go into the town, a certain town, and to prepare, get a room, someone's waiting for them, and to prepare the Passover meal. It's called the Seder. And that Passover meal would have been on a Sabbath day. But we don't know empirically what day of the week it was. My own personal belief is that the Last Supper was Wednesday night as the sun went down. That's my own belief. The sands of time, the calendar has changed. We've gone from Julian to Gregorian, or Gregorian to Julian, and then you have the Jewish calendar, which operates completely different. And it's been tradition to view it as being just the regular Saturday Sabbath, Friday night when the sun goes down. That's been the traditional view going back centuries. And so it's just become ingrained. But you're not the only one who has that problem, because Jesus said, a sinful and adulterous generation seeks a sign. Jesus was being asked, show us a sign, show us another sign. And Jesus said, a sinful and adulterous generation seeks a sign, but no sign shall be given to it except for the sign of Jonah. For just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the whale, so too the Son of Man must be buried in the depths of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights, and then will rise again. And so you're not the only one who has that issue. I do not think Jesus lied. I do not think he rushed it. I think he went to the cross. I think he was uh, all day Thursday, all day Friday, all day Saturday, and then Sunday at the break of dawn, he rose again. That is my belief. Can I prove it? No, but no one can prove otherwise either. So it's become tradition to accept the Friday. Now, there is no question about what day of the week did Jesus rise, because all the gospel accounts tell us that on the first day of the week, which is Sunday, Mary went to the tomb, or Mary, the mother of God, and Mary Salome. It depends which account, but they all agree Mary went to the tomb to anoint Jesus's dead body. and found the stone rolled back. The greatest news in human history. The tomb is empty. Jesus is alive. Um, so Sunday is universally recognized as the day of the resurrection. However, when was the crucifixion? I think it happened on Wednesday. So there we go. Lisa's life is giving an emoji. Um, Brett Skinner says belief in politicians is a fool's idea. Good point. And I try to stress this point, and it's this tension I speak of. Christians were exhorted to be in the world, but not of the world. And there's a tension there. How do you be in the world, but not of it? And we live in a political world, and we obviously want for the best possible leaders. We want justice. We want fairness. We want equity. We want liberty. We want all these things. And these are political ideals. And so, but at the end of the day, God will appoint whom he will appoint. And we will see what happens on April 28th. And then if Pierre Poilievre does get elected, then he has to deliver on the agenda he put forward: cut taxes, cut regulation, get the economy moving again, get our enormous wealth in resources to market, and let's end our total dependency, especially in terms of energy, and our total dependency on the United States is pretty much our only market. Alberta's wonderful oil, 90+% of it is sold to one market and one market only, the United States of America. I think it's 100% of our natural gas goes to the United States. And because they're the only customer, they get it at a discount. Meanwhile, we have countries like Korea and Japan who say, hey, we want to liquefy your natural gas and pipeline it out to us, get it on ships. We'll buy it and we'll pay more, but we can't get pipelines built in this country because of legislation like Bill C-69, which Pierre Poilievre talked about frequently during the debate. It's got 3 phases, and the legislation says that it's designed to get uh, projects through the first phase within 180 days, within 6 months, phase 1 to be completed. Well, every project that's gone through this Bill C-69 process, not one has been approved, not one has moved out of phase 1, and the longest ones have been in there over 300 days, and they're still stuck in phase 1. And the devil is always in the details. The legislation talks about speeding up resource development projects, but then the rules put in place make it nigh and impossible to get it completed. So it's crazy. Lisa's writing, one of my clients said that her brother is friends with one of Justin Trudeau's cabinet ministers, and he said that no matter who votes, the Liberals will be re-elected in this election. If that happens, our elections are just rigged. Let's wait and see what happens. I have faith. I've said this many times. I have faith in the electoral process. We go into the community center, the church basement, the high school gym, wherever your polling station is. The boxes are there. They stay there. They don't leave. Your name is ticked off the voter list. You're given your ballot. You put it into the appropriate box. They'll be numbered 68, 69, 70, 71. There'll be 4 boxes, and based on your address, one of those boxes will be yours. You might be poll 71. They'll give you your ballot and you put it into box number 71, then you leave. That box stays there. There are scrutineers allowed to be in place from every political party, from every candidate can have individuals scrutinizing the vote, making sure nothing untoward happens. Uh, and then when the polls close, 8 or 9 p.m., when the doors close and the election is now it's finished, no more voting, then what happens is you have a returning officer or deputy returning officer that one by one, they open those ballot boxes. They have tabulation sheets with the candidate's name. They write down how many ballots were marked for each candidate, and then the results are tabulated and forwarded on to Elections Canada, and then they get disseminated online. But that entire process of counting, voting and counting, each candidate is allowed to have a scrutineer in every polling station. And yeah, there might be a mistake. They might miss, someone might put an X in the wrong box when tabulating the votes. But the scrutineers are there to point out when an error is made, and any errors that are made, I'm convinced, are simply, human error, just simple human error, nothing intentional, nothing nefarious. And that if there are any mistakes, it's of a computation, calculation variety. And the results being reported, I'm here to tell you, are 99.99999% accurate. I will allow for a small degree of human error to enter into the equation, but come on. So let's wait until voting day. I think ultimately it's going to be, we'll see. What's going to matter most is the province of Ontario, where there are 122 seats up for grabs out of 343, with 173 being what is needed for a majority government. Let me read now, Lisa already thinks the elections are rigged. We'll see what happens. And Koji Malik is saying that she's been busy. No worries. I get it. I was busy today too. Went off to that wonderful church service. 300 or so people in attendance. Loved seeing Christians united. And Danny's thanking me for my explanation about the question. You can go online. I have. And I'm not the only one who has this view that Jesus went to the cross that the Last Supper took place on Wednesday, and that he was in the grave, or he was in the tomb Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 3 days and 3 nights, as Jesus said would happen. Danny's saying, if we don't vote, I think we're going to see incredibly high participation in this vote. The one thing is, I wanted to talk about a few things. Take exception. There are things that are going on that I do think amount to emotional manipulation by the media, by the CBCs of this world, who, all emotional about being afraid of rebel news and things like that. And I don't feel safe, and those horrible right-wing people, and injecting emotion into things to try and sway people over to their point of view. The CBC is scared to death of a Pierre Poilievre victory, and justifiably so. Their paycheck depends on it. Pierre Poilievre has a campaign pledge to defund the CBC, to stop. They can be a nonprofit, government-owned organization, and they'll be up in competition against CTV, against Global, against alternative media outlets. And they can sink or swim based on their ability to garner the news consumer, or they have sports, they have entertainment, they have news, they have different divisions. And if they're able to compete in the marketplace, Bob's your uncle, go at it. But to give them 1 point whatever $billion every year out of taxpayer dollars, there are a lot of Canadians who regard the CBC as garbage journalism because they've been caught lying so many times. They do not do what is journalistic ethics holds, that a journalist, when reporting the news, is supposed to be emotionally detached. And our media does not play by that game. They don't play by the rules. They don't emotionally detach. They're simply there to present the facts. But what they do, and we all saw this in spades during the COVID era when the reporting was so emotionally driven, more terrifying news from the Pine Ridge Nursing Home in Bobcaygeon, Ontario, where the tsunami of death continues. Emotionally driven language and music to scare news consumers. That's what it boiled down to. And, false reporting showing an image of I've talked about it many times. Edmonton CBC putting up a picture on their back green screen or whatever, putting a picture of a mannequin hooked up to a ventilator in an ICU and not disclosing it and not saying, the following image that we're portraying depicts a mannequin hooked up to a ventilator in an ICU. We do this in order to give our viewers an indication of what a patient would look like. However, this is a mannequin. If they did that, that's ethical journalism. But unethical CBC didn't do that. And when they were called out on it, they had to admit, the director of CBC News Edmonton had to admit, and he said, we made an error. It was a mistake, an error in judgment. And I say, bull. It wasn't an error. It was done intentionally, unless the director of CBC News Edmonton never studied, journalistic ethics 101. And you can go on and on and on. During the Ottawa trucker convoy, they had a CBC News crew going down the street, and they showed you little snippets of people they talked to. And there's one woman sitting in like a pickup truck with her feet out the side, on her phone, and they said, "Why are you here in Ottawa?" And the woman said, "They this has to end. I got kicked off of Facebook." And now they probably talked to hundreds, dozens, at least dozens of people, maybe 100 or more. And then they go back to the studio and they have to pick who they're going to put on the air, what segments are going to make it to air. And do they pick cogent, articulate, well-spoken individuals giving, no. They pick the worst of the worst, and that is called straw manning. And it's intellectually weak, and it shows a total lack of journalistic integrity. What you do, you don't straw man, you steel man. You put forth the best argument. But the CBC, the pink-haired fact checkers, with their PhDs in gender studies, are the ones deciding how the narrative is going to be framed. Let me catch up because a lot of things are getting written in here. Laura Floyd is wishing everyone a good evening. Danny's writing that the US should not be getting our LNG at a discount. The reason they get it at a discount is because they're the only customer. They're the only ones who can buy it because all our pipelines run north-south. The oil the gasoline, the oil that is turned into gasoline that is sold in Quebec, first it goes from Alberta down to the southern US, Texas, Louisiana, the Gulf Coast, refined, and then it's pipelined back up to Quebec, because there's no pipeline route. Energy East was never approved. It never got through. And so we only have one customer. So when you're the only customer, if you're looking around and you're at an auction and you're I bought that painting back there at an auction. If I was the only one bidding, I could have got it for $2. But I wasn't the only one bidding, so I had to pay, I remember, $125 for it. Because we were in competition. Right now, the only ones bidding on our LNG, our liquefied natural gas, are the United States. So they get it at a discount to the world price. It's ridiculous. And Pierre Poilievre talks about this. And no one contradicts him on it. No one takes him to task over it because there's nothing to take him to task over. The fact checkers ignore it because it is true. It is true. Northern Gateway, gone. The Energy East, gone. Keystone, yeah, Keystone went ahead. So we can get our energy down there. We can get our energy down to the Americans. But you have Japan, you have South Korea. They want to buy Canadian LNG, but they can't because of our liberal governments that we've had for the past 10 years. So instead, what they do to generate things like hydroelectricity is they burn coal. And, Mark Carney and these environmental types suck and blow at the same time. Because we're keeping much cleaner burning LNG in the ground, it's forcing other countries like Japan, like South Korea, it's forcing them to, or India, to burn coal. And obviously if they start burning our wonderfully, much cleaner LNG, then they stop burning coal. Net benefit, if indeed carbon is the big bad boogeyman, well, then that will reduce global carbon emissions, because Canada, we're a country of only 40 million. And so at any rate, Lisa's Life says no boxes, it's computerized now. No, it is not in Canadian federal elections. When you go to vote, you're going to be handed a paper ballot. There'll be a pencil. You mark an X. Federally. Provincially, municipally, there are different. In Ontario, we have a scanned ballot. You fill out your ballot and then it gets scanned in and the tabulation is automatic. In my municipal election, the last one I participated in, I went in and it was a tablet and touchscreen voting that I engaged with. That was the municipal level, but at the federal level, where our elections are governed by Elections Canada, it's paper ballots. It might be computerized. Every jurisdiction is different. Every province is different. Provincially, but federally, it's the old-fashioned paper ballot that has been in place since my entire 40-year voting career. It's always been the same. There was at one point, they were only putting the candidates down and not their party affiliations, but that got changed back. And now I'll see Philip Lawrence, Conservative Party of Canada, Paul Goheen, Liberal Party of Canada. Then the NDP a name NDP, New Democratic Party, another name Green Party, another name People's Party of Canada. And it's been that way since I was 18 years of age. It hasn't changed. Lisa is saying that she was a scrutineer for the PPC last election. Before we even counted our ballots, Trudeau was called as the winner. So yeah, I don't really have so much faith in that process. Where are you again, Lisa? Because what happens is if you're out in the West Coast, by the time BC votes, the election's already decided. They know by the time they get to the Manitoba border who's going to win. Once the results are in strongly enough, they know. Danny's writing, what about communist BC? Could they affect the election? If it's close, every seat is going to count. Every seat is going to count in every single jurisdiction, and some areas are more contentious, more battleground than others. I don't know BC geography, politics well enough. I know you've got Victoria, you've got Burnaby, you've got Vancouver, Victoria are the big ones. And there's Burnaby, Kelowna. There are other cities as well. There's the lower mainland, and some areas are more conservative. I think the Fraser Valley is very conservatively oriented. We shall see what happens on voting day. The biggest issue I have, and I kind of have some points I wanted to cover off here. I wrote some bullet points, but before I get to them, let me get through the messages. Danny's writing, okay. Airworks 07 is here. It was absolutely pathetic how the CBC lied about the danger of Rebel News. I know that is annoying as hell. The reason Rebel News exists, CBC, is because you suck. CBC News sucks to such a degree that a significant number of Canadians are willing we already pay involuntarily for the CBC through our taxes. So the money's taken away from us and it's handed over to the CBC. So we're already forced to pay for their crappy news. And then a significant number of Canadians, I don't know how big Rebel's subscriber base is, but a significant number of Canadians are saying, even though I'm forced to pay for the CBC, I'm going to write a check every month. I'm going to send money every month to Rebel News because CBC is garbage. They don't present all sides of an issue. They engage in unethical journalism, the green screen showing a mannequin, you know, when Nathaniel Spitzer, the young 14-year-old child who tragically died of stage 4 inoperable brain cancer, the CBC News would not go to air with the complaints from the child's family. His two sisters went to CBC, CTV, and Global, telling them because Alberta Health Services had given a press conference saying that this child had died of COVID, and they knew that their brother didn't die of COVID. He was receiving end of life care for terminal end stage brain cancer, and CBC ignored them because it didn't fit a political agenda. And the CBC is absolute total garbage. Does that mean that Rebel News is an amazing outlet of news? No, no, it doesn't mean that they're great. It just means that they've gained in popularity simply because as an alternative to what is known to be by any intelligent person who can rub two brain cells together recognizes that CBC is grossly biased and that they have no journalistic ethics. So people have turned away from them and they're going with what they view as the opposite. CBC is heavily left wing. I'm going to go heavily right wing. If the CBC would start to engage in ethical, honest journalism and started presenting all sides of contentious issues, then people might come back to them. But instead, CBC has pushed people away to Rebel, True North, the Post Millennial, and there are numerous other outlets. That's why people tune into my YouTube station, is because they recognize that the CBC Newses of the world, we had CTV News, went to air with false allegations against the leader of the provincial Progressive Conservative Party in Ontario, and they did not do their fact checking. They went to air claiming that Patrick Brown had sexually assaulted a high school student. And Patrick Brown was able to, beyond any reasonable doubt, prove that the allegations were 100% bogus and false. And if CTV had done any due diligence at all, that story never should have come to air. It altered the political framework of this province. It's the reason why we have a high school drug dealer as premier in this province. Thank you, CTV, for hijacking democracy in Ontario. It's not just CBC. Global, CBC, CTV. I could go through any of their articles on the political scene, on the COVID scene, and you can see the biased and slanted and yellow journalistic ethics that they hold to. They're garbage. So anyway, uh, CBC, after the debate, tried to contend that they felt threatened by Ezra Levant. I've met Ezra Levant. He's a short, pudgy old guy who couldn't threaten anyone. I don't like Ezra Levant. I don't like David Menzies. I met him as well. I don't like these individuals personality wise, but they're harmless. We live in a free and democratic society. Uh, anyway, what's Airworks is saying? Wait, I missed a few. Oh my gosh, there's a lot coming in. Way too many. I can't keep up. Okay. The New Brunswick Lady for Pierre is back. Appreciated your comment on one of my other videos. I always love comments. It helps build the channel. I've gained about a dozen followers just in the past couple days. My station tends to go fits and starts. I'll have long period where I'll gain one, lose one, gain one, lose one, gain two, lose one. Yeah. And I just very flat line. Then all of a sudden it'll jump by 10 or 20 and then flat line and then jump and flat line and then jump. I kind of like it that way. Um, People come on, they like the content, they enjoy the engagement, they like being on the live chats. Uh, and you don't always have to agree with me, obviously. Um, and Danny saying we no longer have news, we have opinion pieces. And they, and I say it all the time on my station that I'm expressing my thoughts, my views, my opinions. These, and when I do present I will present things as fact, but I always encourage everyone, check, don't take my word for it. Check, do verification. That bit about, Edmonton News and what they did with the mannequin. Just type in CBC News Edmonton mannequin, and it's out there. You can see it from multiple sources, and you can read about how the director of CBC News was forced to apologize for acting in a journalistically unethical manner. It's verifiable. Anyway, at Lisa's Life is writing, imagine we use our taxpayer dollars to pay people to lie to us. Awesome. Yeah. That's the situation we are in Canada. And the US isn't much better. They don't get, they have PBS, of course, but that's, viewer, listener supported. I don't think they have. Uh, I think Donald Trump, the Trump administration, they had Voice of America, but that's not for Americans. That's for international. And he defunded that. You know, we don't, in today's hyper-connected world, we do not need state TAC. In the old Soviet Union, they had the TASS news agency. We don't need that in Canada. We don't need state-owned news telling us what to think, programming us how to feel, what to believe. We don't need it. Um, yeah, and this is the thing. NBA New Brunswick for Pierre. She's writing, my vote went into a box, and it's going to be that way in New Brunswick, in Nova Scotia, dans la belle province du Québec, in Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, BC, the territories. Everyone will be filling out a paper ballot. That's the federal election. They have tabulators that suck in your vote in Ontario for provincial elections, but not the federal. Anyway, Lisa, have you voted in this federal election yet? Because in the provincial election just passed, yeah, you got a scanned in ballot into an automatic tabulator. That's run by Elections Ontario, not by Elections Canada. Yeah, Lisa, that was in the provincial election, not the federal. And in the United States, in a federal election, depends what state you live in. Some states should pull a lever. Some states you have touchscreen voting. Some states have Dominion voting machines that suck them in. There are different systems in every state has their own electoral commission for federal elections. In Canada, federal elections are overseen by a federal election body, Elections Canada. And so it's the same in every province and territory. New Brunswick lady is writing, we have 60,000 people. Maybe that's why. Maybe we are too small of a city. No, it's not because of that. Lisa vote is talking about the provincial election. Federally is different. I like Danny. 97% of doctors agree. They just forgot to tell you they polled only a dozen doctors. Well, you got to learn, marketing and propaganda. In a recent government survey, 9 out of 10 doctors recommend XYZ. And they don't tell you, okay, recent, how recent? A year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Recent is a fuzzy term. Recent. And then recent government survey. What government? Government of Canada, Ontario, regional government in Botswana. You don't tell us what government. And then they say 9 out of 10 doctors. Well, doctors of what? Doctors of philosophy, doctors of theology, doctors of what? Doctors of dentistry, doctors of what? Anyone with a PhD is entitled to the title doctor. They can be given that as a, they're so uh, saying 9 out of 10 doctors recommend our pharmaceutical product. Well, are they actually medical doctors or are they doctors of divinity? Tell us, but they don't. And most won't check. Most will just go, wow, 9 out of 10 doctors recommend this. Well, I'm getting it. The devil is always in the details. Um, Lisa's life. Uh, yeah, Dominion voting machines, that's used in the province of Ontario, not in Canada. Have you voted, Lisa's life? Have you voted in this federal election, not the provincial? Because in the provincial elections in Ontario, we do use Dominion voting machines. It's kind of, you give them your ballot and it goes into a machine, like when you put a check in the bank machine, an envelope in the bank machine gets sucked in that way, and it's automatic, and the tabulation is automatic. In Canada, for federal elections, the ballots are counted by hand. Yeah, I know it's in Canada, but Ontario is in Canada. Uh, New Brunswick Lady for Pierre writes, we turned away all of the countries that came knocking and asking for our LNG. Basically, well, they come knocking, but we have to be able to get it to them. And so to get it to them, we need pipelines to deliver the LNG to Tidewater. And what that means is Tidewater is just an expression for a port that will get onto the ocean. So we could do it in the West Coast, we could do it somewhere in James Bay, Hudson's Bay, or we can do it on the East Coast. But we need a pipeline that terminates at a port at Tidewater. I noticed Pierre Poilievre did use that expression, Tidewater, and it's a shipping expression. It's not commonly used. We need to get it to a port. Viral sigma or stigma, viral stigma is here, asking, you see the latest news of liberals spamming Pierre's riding with 87 independents to mess with his riding, 91 people on the ballot. Yeah, I know, it's ridiculous. I did see that. I didn't read the story. I saw the headline. And there is a group in Canada in the 2015 election, after Trudeau's Liberals had been elected to a majority government. In his victory speech, Pierre Justin Trudeau stated that this will be Canada's last ever election with first past the post voting. We He wanted to bring in a ranked ballot. There's talk of a ranked ballot or conversely proportional representation, but a lot of Canadians went, finally. Now we're not going to have, sometimes the winning candidate gets 32, 33% of the vote because you have 5 candidates on the ballot and it's just whoever gets the most votes, even if it's only 32%. Well, you won. So you get the seat. And he promised to get rid of that. And there was a protest movement. And what they did is during recent by-elections is they had 90, 100 plus candidates on the ballot to make it very unwieldy. And now who are they targeting? Pierre Poilievre is not the one who promised to end first past the post voting, and yet it's his riding that is being targeted. Pierre Poilievre is going to have no issues winning his Carleton riding, Ottawa area riding, although as I understand it, he grew up out west. I think he's got a great way. Yeah, he grew up in the West, but now he lives in Ottawa. He lives in Carleton. He represents the riding of Carleton. So he understands this country well. He hasn't been over in England. He hasn't been calling himself a European. They said to Mark Carney at some international conference, they said, well, your opinion as a Canadian. He said, well, actually, I'm a European. Oh, really? Mr. Elbows up, eh? Give me a break. Um, So yes, I did see that. 91 people on the ballot trying, and that will mean that it will take forever to count the ballots, to go through all those 91 names and fill out the tabulation sheet now has to have 91 names on it. Oh, it's a mess. They disallowed the Federal Debate Commission disallowed the Green Party, wouldn't let them participate in the debates, either the French or the English. And yet they'll allow Gilles who Blanchet, I'm not sure exactly whether it's Blanchette or Blanchet, but I think it's Blanchet, Blanchet. They allowed him to participate in the English language debate, despite the fact that the Bloc Québécois obviously is not running a candidate anywhere in any other province other than the province of Quebec. They're a Quebec French centric party. What is he doing in the English language debate? And yet they kick out the Green Party. And I'm no fan of the Green Party. I'm actually vehement. The whole notion of that Canada, that we should all freeze in the dark to save to save planet Earth from the big bad boogeyman of climate change, is to me a fairy tale. And worse than a fairy tale, it's more like, oh yeah, I guess a little bit like a fairy tale, a scary fairy tale, like Hansel and Gretel. It's a bad fairy tale. Anyway, um, Airworks talking about the fact that Pierre mentioned about LNG during the debate. Hopefully, people actually listened. Hopefully, but I think I went to the local candidates meeting here in my town of Brighton, Ontario, farming area, and so many people, when they were questioning the candidates, they were all very local centric. They're very much concerned about farming issues and about land transfer when a farmer retires and he's transferring, the farm over to his kids, and the tax implications and everything like that. And these are genuine issues and they are important, but they're very localized. And I find a lot of people have very much tunnel vision. So, if you're in Ontario, well, Ontario isn't a big producer of natural gas. So what do we care? Well, it affects us because Alberta's wealth is Canada's wealth. And pipelines, transit fees that exist along pipelines, it'll bring wealth all over, construction jobs in Ontario. Pipelines need to be built, they need to be monitored, they need to be maintained. There's money to be made. And yet most of it, yes, would be in Alberta, but then they pay more in taxes. That gives more money for our military, more money for infrastructure, more money for policing, more money for, keeping us safe. Why are we keeping our resources and our wealth in the ground? It is beyond me, but Mark Carney is all in on this net zero garbage for Canada. Meanwhile, Brookfield invests in pipelines in the Middle East. They can have pipelines. And, they'll invest in US coal, while Canada, well, we freeze in the dark. Just going on. Um, and getting on, I want to know, Lisa's life. Have you voted yet in this federal election? It's an important answer. And Lisa's life is in Oakville. It's on the west end of Toronto, just on the way to Hamilton. Danny is writing that it's cheaper to buy a skidoo by a few $1,000s in Vermont than in Quebec, where they are made. But it's illegal for me to get one in the US and bring it back. Insane. I didn't know that. I didn't know it was illegal. I'm not surprised by the fact that it costs more in Quebec, because the taxation in Quebec is over the roof, through the roof. Quebec is a distinct society. By and large, Quebecers, I don't want to go down that road. J'adore la province de Quebec. I love the Quebec language. I love Québécois. I love the language. I love the French language, especially Québécois, the Quebec version of the French language. There's so much joy and passion in it. And I love the, culture, the food, I love Quebec, but it's got to be the most bureaucratic province in this country. It's insane the amount of bureaucracy they have. And they seem to like it because we're distinct, we're different, we do things differently. It costs a lot more, but it's worth it. That seems to be a common attitude among people that I know, not all, but a lot of people I know in Quebec. Um, so I just saw the message of Lisa's life saying that she lives in Oakville, and then Max is writing. He's shown up. Good evening, happy Friday, my friends. Max is saying that's a great point. I miss Rex Murphy on CBC, who gave good and fair conservative perspective when he was still alive. Rex Murphy, I liked him. He's a Newfoundlander, and he would present. You got more than just one side, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. Big Brother is encroaching further and further and further, and now Pierre Poilievre has the CBC crap in their pants because think of it, you're an employee with CBC, you're making a six-figure income, 100 grand a year plus, and now if Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives get in, you might have to be worrying about lining up at one of those food banks that where the lines keep getting longer and longer. You sure as heck don't want that. You got to save your paycheck. You don't want to have to compete again. You trash all over Rebel News. Rebel News survives because people are willing to take money out of their pocket and hand it directly to Rebel News or to True North or to the post millennial. That's how these media outlets survive, is because people like them so much that they're willing to pay them out of pocket. CBC gets their money, and Canadians have no choice. The money is taken right out of our taxes. I don't want the CBC getting any of my money. Too bad. You don't get to decide. All right, well, I'm writing a check. I'm setting up pre-authorized payment. I'm giving Rebel 25 bucks a month because I'm sick of you guys. And they're so arrogant, self-interested. We need to be done with the CBC. Everyone's saying good evening. Uh, Danny's writing CBC funded by the liberals. That means China by proxy. Lisa's life. What are the police investigating my MP, Anita Anand, for? Anyone know if that's even true? So Lisa's in Oakville. I'm going to look in. I haven't heard anything about that. Anita, I don't know if you wrote the name right. Anand looks right. Um, it's I know nothing about that. Viral Stigmas writing, they showed the behind the scenes and there was no harm in the press room as they had inclined, or that's the way they put it forward, is that in the press room after the debate, when they were waiting for the leaders to come out to have their post debate media scrum, they tried to tell us that there was this big, you know, kerfuffle that threatened to get violent, but all the video evidence, ho hum, yawn, looks like nothing. But they've got to go at Pierre Poilievre somehow. There's a he could have some very strong momentum coming out of that debate, and voting ship to rescue Mark Carney if his ship starts to sink. Max is writing, liberals want to protect people from words. Liberal online harms bill. Yeah, words are dangerous. It used to be, when I was growing up, we were told sticks and stones may break your bones, but words can, but words will never hurt me. Now it's words hurt. Words hurt. And I don't ever want to advocate being unkind, but unfortunately, if you want to have any type of a meaningful discussion over important issues, you have to be willing to risk offending others and of being offended yourself. I'm offended by people who advocate that children should have mutilating surgeries done on them and calling it care. I find that offensive. Would I ban someone from having the right to express that opinion? Absolutely not. Even though it offends me, even though I'm vehemently opposed to it, mutilating surgeries on minor children and hacking off healthy tissue to me is akin to Joseph Mengele. However, I'm not going to advocate that someone not be allowed to express that opinion. There's a difference between the left and the right. Um, anyway, reading on what Max finished with. Instead of protecting Canadians from actual violence from criminals, yeah, we got to protect you from words, and we have to be nice to the criminals. We have to give sentences that are as light as possible, with as little observation as possible. We have to be as kind as possible to these horrible criminals because they've been victimized, and we forget the actual victims of the crime. Uh, and then the whole idea of catch and release. Um, And no, New Brunswick lady for Pierre is asking if we already discussed the fellow from Rebel News that was assaulted. I heard some chatter about that. I haven't had time to look into it yet. I'm honestly not a big fan of Rebel News. As I said, I went in December of 2021. I attended a large rally, a large event in Whitby, Ontario, uh, hosted by a group called the Democracy Fund, and it was wonderful. 800 of us in a large school auditorium, college auditorium. Nobody wearing a mask. Nobody got vaccinated. Maybe one or two. Probably there was the odd person. I only saw one guy wearing a mask. He was a security guard, and it was just a wonderful, loving, unified group of people acting normally at a time when a lot of the world was not acting normal. And I met Ezra Levant and David Menzies there. Not impressed with them in person, never impressed with the content they put out. I find them very clickbaity. I find them very emotionally driven. They just do the opposite of what the CBC does, but they do it in the same manner. A lot of it is very emotional driven. I don't think the news should be emotionally driven, but I get it. They're being the yin to the CBC's yang. You want to propagandize the left, we're going to propagandize the right. And anyway, I still pay attention to the CBC. I like to hear what they're saying, and I do pay attention to outlets like Rebel News because I want to hear what they're saying. I want to hear the full thing and try and filter through everything and come to my own conclusions. Um, Danny writes, thanks to The Chosen, I've learned that soon can be very subjective. If you watch The Chosen, that's something of a running joke in The Chosen, which is a depiction. It's a streaming series that is 5 seasons long so far. I think they have another 2 or 3 seasons planned about the life and ministry of Jesus Christ. And they make an ongoing joke of this, when will it happen? Soon. And it's such a fuzzy term. Uh, New Brunswick, the older gentleman, David Menzies, he's the one with the hat. He is the guy who likes to wear the hat. Yeah, that's David Menzies. Uh, if it wasn't the hat makes him it's something of a trademark for him. Max Power, 9 out of 10 doctors recommend it, but then they neglect to mention they de-licensed doctors that didn't follow the narrative, like in COVID. Uh, and then Max is talking about Jordan Peterson's forced re-education. Have they ever found someone who was willing to give him to re-educate him? Because from what I understood, the last I had heard of it, after they gave that ruling that forced him to go and take some online sensitivity training, that they were unable to find anyone willing to go and actually try and re-educate Jordan Peterson about how to participate on platforms like X, Twitter. Um, Just reading. New Brunswick lady for Pierre thinks that it's BS that Carney stole a spot that just happened to be bordering Pierre's riding. Yeah, he stole the riding of Nepean that already had a candidate. And at that time, when he stole the riding, when he had, well, the Liberal Party, he said, I didn't do it. It was the executive. It was our, we have a board, we have a body in place to determine candidates' eligibility, and they decided he's no longer eligible, elected twice already, would have been running for election for the third time. They kicked him out and they parachuted Mark Carney into that riding. And there were over 100 ridings where the Liberals didn't have a candidate yet. Mark Carney could have had his pick of vacant ridings. No, not doing it. I want that one. That one's easy. That one I'm guaranteed to win. That's why he stole it. Uh, and Danny's putting saying that Pierre is an ex-Albertan, as I was saying, which puts him at the advantage because he can think like an Albertan. I view him as having a unique sense, a unique perspective, having grown up in Alberta, but now living in Ontario, representing, the riding of Carleton, which is right next door to Nepean. Uh, I hope Mark Carney loses his damn riding. I think there's a chance. There's a chance. Boy, that would be nice. Viral Stigmas writing, remember, before the climate change push, saying that we're all going to boil, it wasn't too long ago, they were saying we were heading for, well, I remember that in the 1970s. I was watching on TV the Nova science TV show, hosted by Leonard Nimoy, interviewing top climate experts who were predicting an ice age, that winter would come and never go away. And I remember I saw that when I was living in Burlington. It would have been like 1975 or 1976. And I was scared. It's like, oh my God, I hated winter. I hate freezing. And now they're predicting, these are climate experts, leading experts in the field of climate research. Now I realize that leading experts in climate science, basically, they can't predict what's going to happen in 6 months, let alone 5, 10, 15 years. They keep saying another 5 years, the polar ice caps will be completely eradicated. There will be no more polar ice caps. 5 years later, well, we were wrong, but that's because we didn't consider this or that in our model, but we fixed that. And now definitively in another 5 years, there won't be any ice in the polar ice caps. And then 5 years more goes by and it's like we were wrong again, but we're still saying doom and gloom. In the year 2000, there were British climate experts predicting that in a few short years, children will not know what snow is. Just got some thunder and lightning here. Uh, so, New Brunswick Lady for Pierre is writing Albertan French Indigenous heritage has got all that stuff. Oh, as far as Pierre Poliev is considered, yeah. His French is, for a guy with the name Poiliev, I would expect his French to be a little better. I could see in him the same things that happened to me, parce que parfois j'aime faire des vidéos en français et je sais que parfois je dois penser fort, comment traduire, j'ai la misère avec certaines expressions, ça me prend de temps. I notice that when I'm speaking French, I know when I'm struggling a bit, and I recognize that same type of struggle going on with Pierre Poliev. And with a name like Poliev, I mean, you expect it from a guy like Gordon Causey. I've got as English and sounding a name as you could ever possibly have. Gordon Causey. Gordon is Scottish, right? My mother's father was from Scotland, from Glasgow. So I don't even know why he doesn't speak French better. But whatever, it's all right. All right, I like Scotland. Anyway, that's Gordon is a Scottish name, and Causey is a British English name. England, Ireland, Scotland. England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales. My ancestry comes from all four corners of the British Isles. I should be Francophobe. They call it Francophobia. The British hate the French. I should hate them, but I love them. Anyway, Uh, so much being written. Danny's writing that Quebec gets equalization payments from Alberta. No kidding. You would think that Quebec would be all in favor of, and I understand that public opinion in Quebec is shifting towards allowing pipelines. Hopefully it will happen. Viral Stigma's writing, Quebec was going to drill their own oil and canceled it because their GDP would be the same since they would no longer get equalization payments. It's a welfare trap in a sense. I think that was on what's that island? Danny will know. The Quebecers will know. There's not Cap de la Madeleine. I'm trying to remember. There's a big island in the St. Lawrence River. Ile la Madeleine, I think it is. I worked with a sergeant in the military who was from there. And boy, even the Quebecers had trouble with his accent because this Ile la Madeleine, they have their own distinct accent themselves. And when I had trouble understanding them, a Quebecer told me, don't worry, even the regular Quebecers have trouble with the people from Ile la Madeleine. And they were going to explore that island for oil and natural gas, but there were all kinds of environmental concerns, blah, blah, blah. That was going on back when I lived in Quebec. And the sales tax in Quebec is insane, 15%. And he's also right. I quit watching the news when CTV Lloyd Robertson retired. For some reason, I trusted him. Older journalists, I think older broadcasters like Peter Mansbridge, like Lloyd Robertson from the American context, like Walter Cronkite, were very good at being emotionally detached. Now I find the younger generation is far more, emotionally, they play on emotion because emotion, I haven't said this for a while, but I've said it a ton. When you can engage someone emotionally, they shut off their brain. They're far more easy to manipulate. Uh, Max is writing, Mark Carney performed so badly yesterday. He admitted the biggest threat to Canada was China. And yet he couldn't answer why he got a giant loan from China and refuses to disclose his assets. Let's hope. Let's hope. Um, Viral Stigma is writing, I'm near the end. I like the news topics that Rebel brings up, but they do have an antagonistic edge to them. I get why. It's good theater for some when they are tired of the typical far left word salad. Very well written. Very well written. I'm going to read that comment again. I like the news topics Rebel brings up, but they do have an antagonistic edge to them. I get why. It's good theater for some when they are tired of the typical far left word salad. Brilliant comment. Sheriff of YouTube is here and writing, I wonder when Canada will have its very own Communist Party of China, CCP party. We already do. We have the Marxist-Leninist Party as a registered political party in Canada, or at least they used to be. Um, and I imagine they still are. Max is writing that Mark Carney loves doom and gloom and fear mongering, scaring people about global warming, Brexit in the UK, and now Trump and his unilaterally claiming our relationship with the US is over. Carney, oh, I've got no use for him, but I'm going to cover off some points that I wrote down and that I haven't covered yet. Number one is the fact that we're voting on April 28th. We've got just 10 days left. This election was only 36 days long. And I wrote something on my Facebook timeline that if you want to read it, it's the most recent post that I did. You can go on to Gordy Canuck, Gordie Canuck, Canuck. And what I wrote is this is why Carney chose the shortest possible election cycle. In Canada, an election is required to be a minimum of 36 days. And that is exactly what Mark Carney and his liberal operatives chose, the shortest possible election cycle. they could have had it at 51. They could have gone 51 days. We'd have another 2 weeks for this momentum shift to gather some steam. But no, he went with the shortest possible, 36. And the reason is crystal clear to anyone with two brain cells to rub together. After they had their Liberal Party love in for the Carney coronation, with him at the top of the news feed for weeks. And then, as soon as he was coronated, he jumped on a plane for a taxpayer funded photo opportunity in France and then in England. So Carney was dominating the news feed, basically in Canada, the way that Donald Trump dominates news in the United States. And I know that many of my conservative minded friends thought I was crazy. Before Trudeau resigned, I was speculating that a Carney led Liberal Party could resurrect Liberal fortunes. Well, resurrect them he did. And it simply became a game of trying to maintain the momentum long enough to ensure victory on voting day. And even if the momentum shifted, wanted to make sure that the Conservatives would be too far behind to make up any significant ground because there's just not enough time. What have we found out during this shortest possible election campaign? We found out that Mark Carney, while traveling to China on government business as the Liberal Party's top economic advisor, that he took a side trip to the Bank of China in order to secure a $250+ million loan from the Chinese for his company, Brookfield Asset Management, $250 million. We found out that while Carney was chair at Brookfield Asset Management, that he sent a letter to shareholders urging them to vote in favor of moving Brookfield's head office from Toronto to New York City. And the shareholders did approve what Carney wanted, although the actual move did not take place until after Carney resigned his position so that he could be coronated King of Canada. And then he lied about it, saying, well, that was done after I left the company. His board approved the move while he was the chair, and then they simply needed a rubber stamp from the shareholders. We found out that Carney had investment funds registered in the tax-free haven of Bermuda, using the address of a bike shop to avoid Canadian taxation. We've seen pictures of Carney from 2013 rubbing elbows with the likes of Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's partner in crime, a woman who's now in jail for recruiting children to go to an island to be sexually exploited by the rich and famous, like guys like Prince Andrew, Randy Andy. We've seen him stand by and support a Liberal Party candidate who advocated that a rival politician be kidnapped and handed over to the Chinese consulate for a bounty of about 184,000 Canadian dollars. And why was this bounty put on this Canadian's head? Because Joe Tay supports free speech and democracy, those movements in Hong Kong. And that's just a primer. Carney won't disclose his financial assets to Canadians until after the election. He says that we should just trust him and that he has integrity. And I'm here to tell you, when someone tells you that they're an honest person and that they have integrity, it's like that car salesman who says, I'm going to be honest with you here. When someone says that, they're dishonest and they can't be trusted. So the shortest possible election cycle made sense in a purely Machiavellian sense, doing whatever it takes in order to win, forget honesty, forget integrity, just win. That's Mark Carney. And I posted that to my Facebook timeline. So that covers off that. We talked about Rebel, and there's a tendency, there are a lot of Canadians who don't like Rebel news. And so they try to point, well, it's guilt by association. If you vote conservative, you're like these guys who like Rebel news. And people sometimes, they play this game of guilt by association and they straw man things. to make, they'll people who like rebel news, they'll show the most regrettable person, someone who likes to drop an F-bomb every 3 words. And then, well, if you vote conservative, you're just like this guy. Hate this. In my last video, someone accused me of being a conspiracy theorist. And that label works for some to say, you don't want to be like those conspiracy theorists. And, as was noted in that video by some of the comments going up at the time, often conspiracy theory is just a spoiler alert for the truth. And the last thing I wanted to cover off was I'm hoping we're going to see a lot of youth get involved in this election. I've come across a YouTube channel, young kid from, I'm assuming, Toronto, and I'm going to recommend his channel. So anyone still watching, I got a dozen or so people still watching the live feed. Check out this kid, Damani, Dimani. Young kid, goes out with a microphone to Brampton, to Oakville, to all over. And he's just going around and asking people who they're supporting in this election. And he appears, to my eyes, and I can't say for 100% certainty, but he looks to me to be, um, he doesn't present any bias. I don't know if he's voting liberal or conservative. I think he's just reporting. And I noticed earlier he was getting a lot more people supportive of Carney, and now it seems to be swinging very much toward Pierre Poilievre. Now, this is just one kid, looks to be a 20-something, baseball cap. He's black. He's got the dreads. Looks like a young hipster, smart, sharp kid going out with his mic and asking people, who are you voting for in this election, or who do you support in this election? And does that mean that lots of kids are getting involved? I mean, for this kid, he's got a lot more subscribers, a lot more followers. His videos are viewed a lot more than mine. So he's probably making a little bit of coin from this. And, he's on YouTube, and YouTube is dominated by older guys. YouTube is primarily older, primarily male. I hope the kids get involved in this election. We need them. And I think kids recognize that this country is off the rails, can't afford a home, crime through the roof, so many problems in this country. They recognize that things are going, and children, the youth in this country recognize the insanity of hacking off healthy, tissue of children and prescribing puberty blockers and things of this nature. People recognize that we've gone off the rails. And I hope the young people get out and vote. I know that they came out in large number in 2015 because Justin Trudeau promised them they could get high legally. We're going to legalize marijuana, and that motivated a lot of young people to get out and vote. Well, I hope enough of them will be motivated to get out to vote for a conservative candidate to try and get this country back on the rails, because things are bad. Now, a lot of messages have been written since I left off. Okay, I'm going to start. New Brunswick lady for Pierre wanted the shortest possible election. Danny won an election the day after Carney was selected. Thing is, he wanted to jump on a plane, go and shake hands with Macron, with Starmer, get his picture in the paper, be at the top of the news feed. He was getting a lot of positive press, wanted to build that momentum going into the election. So he had to wait a few days. And New Brunswick lady is writing that, he didn't do anything substantive. Carney, when he did that, going to England, going to France, first France, then England, he did nothing substantive. It's not like Canada reached any agreements with these two countries. This was just pure politics, nothing more. He had no mandate from the Canadian people whatsoever. He doesn't even hold a seat in our House of Commons, and he's going over there, and it was pure theater. It was Donald Trump style theater. That's all it was. And then Max is writing at New Brunswick lady for Pierre. True, it was just a photo op for his campaign so he could practice his prime minister impersonation and then immediately call the shortest possible election. Bingo. And Max goes on to say, Carney has been coddled and protected from the beginning. I think that's why he did so badly in the debate. He's never been tested like that. He's used to being chairman of the board and having the hammer, and you shut up. You can talk. He's used to having the role of being like the moderator, but the moderator with all the power. He's used to being judge and jury. He's used to occupying that top seat, not in a democratic situation, but in an autocratic situation. And he's having to learn that in politics, things work differently, and he doesn't do well at it. He is not used to the political arena. And the office of Prime Minister of Canada is a political position. He's a fish out of water. I know it's a criticism of Pierre Poilievre that he has been a career politician. When I look at Pierre Poilievre, this is what I see. I see a young man who is very idealistic, got his university degree, wanted to have an impact on the world, and so decided from a young age to enter the political arena. And because he's got such a sharp intellectual mind, he attracted enough votes to get himself elected to the House of Commons, and he's been there ever since. And I still think he has a lot of that youthful, idealistic zeal. He does not believe that the government solves problems. He believes the government creates problems, and that what we need most to do is to get the government out of the way. Because if you get the government out of the way, Canadians have the brains, the ingenuity, the drive, the passion to solve the problems if we can get the frickin' government out of the way. That sounds Canadian. Frickin'. The frick getting the government out of the way, eh? That frickin' government just driving me crazy. Anyway, New Brunswick lady is writing, companies like Brookfield would have been boycotted and protested. Oh yeah, the left used to hate the Brookfields of the world. Now they want their former chairman to be the prime minister of Canada. They're defending the fact that the uber rich are using Bermuda as a tax-free haven to register their investment funds in. Now it's okay. You know, when Brian Mulroney did that kind of crap, when Brian Mulroney was found, I called him brown bag Mulroney, and the Mulroneys and Trudeau's were friends. You know, anyway, New Brunswick lady, companies like Brookfield, yeah. Viral is writing, we also found out CSIS warned Beijing was intending to interfere with the elections, and saying that Pierre Poilievre was like Trump all the way back since 2021. Here we are 4 years later. Beijing wants Mark Carney. They own him. Beijing owns Mark Carney, and he is their guy. He he is not Canada first. He's China first, World Economic Forum, and Canada last. New Brunswick lady wanted a shorter election. We need liberals out before something pops up in the world that might delay the election. For goodness knows only how long. And then Sheriff is writing that Carney looks to be as gay a man can look before going gay. Oh man, not that there's anything wrong with that, to quote the old Seinfeld show. Um, and then I have Danny, I'm not a crook. It's been a while since I did my Richard Nixon. I'm not a criminal. I'm not a crook. Okay. Been a while. In 1972, as a Canadian living in New Jersey, I went to school in grade one, and that was the 1972 election between Richard Nixon and George McGovern. And my school, Claire E. Coleman, had an election. We had a straw poll, a vote. And I came home from school that day, and my mom said, "What did you do at school?" And I said, "We had the election." "You voted?" And I said, "Yes, we voted for the president." My mom said, "Who did you vote for?" And I said, "I voted for Richard Nixon." Or I'd probably say, "I voted for Richard Nixon." I would have been talking with a higher voice and with a New Jersey accent. I've been living, since 6, 7 months old in New York, and then, for years more in New Jersey. And my mom her head just about blew up. She says, left wing as the day is long, she was. And years later, when my politics started to tilt more to the right, and we'd argue over politics, because I wasn't voting for Chrétien after his first election. And then she would hit me with, well, what do you know? You voted for Nixon when I was 6. Anyway, uh, Max liked my Facebook post, no problem. Every now and again, I should do videos where I script something out like that and then read it. And when I read it, I don't read it verbatim, word for word. I try to throw some inflection in, a few extra words here and there. Um, Sheriff is writing that Rebel News is out of the 2016 camp that replaced Alex Jones on YouTube. Okay. New Brunswick lady. I like my tinfoil hat to have a chin strap so that it never falls off. Well, I'll tell you, there are a lot of people regretting the fact that they rolled up their sleeves and they wish they had tinfoil hats. And that's why it's probably about 90% of Canadians stopped getting boosters, is because they initially got the first, a lot of Canadians got the first 2 shots and a booster because they believed the propaganda that was going out on outlets like CBC that said, once you've had your 2 doses, you cannot get infected. And it's an act of kindness because even though you may not be afraid of getting sick and it being serious, you'll save someone's grandma through this chain of transmission. Oh, okay, I'm a good person, I'll get it. And then they get horribly sick and they pass it on and well, it didn't work. So, did CBC News ever come out and even apologize? Back in December, January, February of 2020, 2021, and on, months later, we were engaged in some false reporting. We were telling Canadians that 2 injections of the COVID jabs, that it would stop you from getting infected or from transmitting COVID. And we need to admit that we got that wrong. I haven't seen it. If it's happened, I haven't seen it. At least I saw Piers Morgan did a sit down chat with Tucker Carlson, and he owned up the fact that he was wrong. And he admitted, I was emotionally engaged. I was emotional. He said, I know people who died of COVID, and so I was emotional. And when you get emotional, you stop thinking. It shuts off the higher thought processes that take place in the frontal lobes of the brain, where all our higher thought, where critical thinking takes place. Well, that when you get emotional, that gets shut down. It's where we use this word triggered. Well, I got triggered. I got emotional. I turned into a little whiny little brat child. And that's what Piers Morgan did. And that should not be on our airwaves. And if you watch Dr. John Campbell's station and check back from a while ago, find out what the protocol was for people who came in and were struggling to breathe in the National Health Service in Great Britain. The National Health Service, through their division called NICE, a bit of an odd acronym, NICE, they were advocating a cocktail of drugs that included morphine and opiates. And then their own protocol said, do not be alarmed that this combination of drugs will suppress a person's breathing. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. Someone comes in, they're struggling to breathe, and now you're going to give them a cocktail of medications that further make breathing difficult? What? And then people died? Well, did they die of the disease or did they die from the treatment? I'm not going to suggest an answer because I don't want to get in trouble. I don't have the requisite medical knowledge to offer a definitive opinion one way or the other, so I'll just leave it there. Man, oh man. Da, da, da. And Airworks is saying that Airworks follows Damani, this young lad that I mentioned, and I would recommend to everyone to follow him. But make that decision up on your own. Go watch him. I just like the kid. I like seeing a young lad engaged in the political process and doing a better job of what I do. He's more technologically adept than I am. Uh, and Airworks is saying that he was at the rallies and that he is great. And then New Brunswick is saying Dabani is incredible, incredibly good. He can connect with youth and seniors, uh, people of color and white equally. He's appealing. He's just a super kid. I don't know how old he is. I would guess he's somewhere in and around 20. And yeah, he's respectful. He's kind. He doesn't betray any biases. CBC should hire him if they're interested in some ethical journalism, but they won't. Uh, and then Denny, if Carney wins, we can rename our country Chinata. We're almost there already. Uh, And then Sheriff is writing that he's saying, I see Pierre as an orphan who made it out of his predicament and is a respectable young man who has always had a job in Ottawa because he is he's a sharp cookie. And he has a lovely family. And his wife is emigrated into Canada, I think from Venezuela, from South America. He's got a great story, far better than Mark Carney rubbing elbows with Ghislaine Maxwell. And yet Canadians, the so-called liberals, they want the guy who rubs elbows with women like Ghislaine Maxwell. Give me a break. Come on, liberals, you're better than that. You're smarter than that. You're kinder than that. You're more compassionate than that. Come on. Um, and Danny says he has a tinfoil suit. Sheriff is writing about as proud as adopted parents could ever be. Pierre is a real Canadian success story. I hope he wins, even if he can't fix everything, including the fact that we are 40 years into becoming the third world. He's it's going to be tough. The challenges are going to be real. He has to deliver on his promises. It won't be easy. He'll be getting pushback. Uh, yeah. And then Danny's writing, I think Pierre is Colombian. I think his wife is Venezuelan, but maybe Colombian. South American in any case. Anyway, I've gone on for an hour and 37 minutes. That's long enough. Thank you, everyone, for filling up the live chat. It was amazing. I think I covered off everything I wanted to talk about. I'm going to take a day off tomorrow. Definitely not going. I'm not planning to do a live stream tomorrow. I hope everyone had a great Good Friday. I loved the church service that I went to today because it was incredibly solemn. If you think about what happened 2,000 years ago, on that hill, I can't even pronounce it, Golgotha, or however it's, the place of the skull where Jesus was nailed to a cross, where he died. And this is not a time of celebration. It's a time of solemnity. It's a time of mourning. And the service, what they did is over the course of the service, the lights progressively dimmed. And there was a candle, the Christ candle was lit, and it was at the front of the stage, right on the chancel, just at the top of the chancel steps. And we read through Mark's account of the crucifixion of Jesus being convicted by Pilate about the release of Barabbas. And who do you want me to crucify? Crucify Jesus. Why? What has he done wrong? Crucify him. The dividing up of his clothes, reading the whole account of Mark with songs sung in between each passage. Read 4 or 5 verses from Mark and then sing a song. 4 or 5 verses from Mark, sing a song, including that song, Were You There When They Crucified My Lord? And that's a song, that's a hymn. It's a worship song that can tear me up. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Because I introspectively look at that song and I say to myself, yeah, I was there. I was there. And I was the one yelling, crucify. I was the one mocking. I was the one jeering. I was doing all the things because it's because of me that Jesus went to that cross and suffered that brutal, excruciating death. We get the word excruciating is derived from the word crucifixion. Excruciating, crucifixion, the words are linked. I don't know the etymology in depth, but the words are linked. horrible, horrible death. And anyway, so as the service went on, the lights got dimmer and dimmer. And then the last thing that happened was the Christ candle was snuffed out. It is finished. Jesus was dead on the cross. The light of the world had gone out. And we were in a dark 2,000 years ago on that day. Whether it was good, whether it was a Friday or a Wednesday, whatever the case, the world went into a very dark place, and it's not a time for celebration. Now, of course, having read ahead and knowing what comes, I'm very much looking forward to Sunday, because Sunday is the most joyous day on the calendar. It's incredible. And Christians, when I was a child, Easter, which is what I called it as a child. I prefer the term Passover now, but Easter Sunday was the greatest day of the year, bigger than Christmas. And the incredible lightness of being. It was like all of a sudden I could walk on air. I loved the Easter message of light conquering darkness, of life conquering death. And man, it meant a lot to me. So I'm just looking over the last of the notes. At any rate, I will end this off with my usual blessing, not my blessing, a book blessing from the book of Numbers, the blessing that Aaron spoke over God's covenant chosen people, of which you and me and we're all invited to be a part of through Jesus's blood sacrifice on that cross 2,000 years ago. You know the blessing. May the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you, and may the Lord grant you peace. And all the politics aside and everything, no matter what happens, we're in his hands. Our feet can rest firm on the rock that is Jesus Christ. And peace be with you. And we'll see you all Sunday. Good night.